So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Patricia, the Director of Sunriver LaPine Economic Development, and Geoff, who I don't know how to pronounce his last name, LaPine City Manager. Go ahead and take it away.
It's Wullschlager. I know it's a mouthful, so no worries.
Good morning, everyone. I am Patricia Lucas. Thank you for having Geoff and I today to make this presentation. Before I get started on the presentation, I'd like to just give you a little bit of background about the Sunriver LaPine Economic Development Office. We have a mission to create a diversified local economy and a strong base of middle-class jobs in South Deschutes County. We serve Sunriver and LaPine. To do this, we focus on helping companies move, start and grow in our area. We attract and guide outside employers through the relocation process as a resource for regional data, incentives, talent, site selection, and more. We also work to help startup businesses to locate in our area. We provide some individual counseling as well as work with the Small Business Development Center network. And most new jobs come from existing employers, so we have a very strong retention calling program where we help local businesses grow in our area. So my job is to work with businesses to identify, resource, and tailor the assistance to facilitate their projects. Our ultimate goal is to help businesses create jobs and bring new capital investment to enhance the local economy. So Amy, I don't know, can they see the presentation?
You should be able to share your screen. You should have the ability to do that.
Okay.
Should be that little green button on the bottom.
Yeah, I need to go back to the beginning of it though.
Perfect. We can see it though. Looks great.
Let me do the slideshow. There we go. So to get started, we're going to talk a little bit about Central Oregon. In terms of flying, it's about 1 to 1.5 hours to San Francisco and Seattle. You can get to Portland in 3.5 hours, 5.5 hours to Seattle, and 10 hours to San Francisco. And we also promote rail service out of our area. You can see the per capita income numbers for the Bend-Redmond MSA. And our unemployment rate continues to go down from the peak during the pandemic. And the last census number that we have published is almost 250,000 people. Of the people who live in Central Oregon, 55.9% of them are in the workforce, and 26% of them are college educated, which is actually a pretty high number. So we're pretty proud of that. The Central Oregon economy is a top performing economy. Deschutes County is the fastest growing county in Oregon. Number 2 in terms of fastest growth in the United States. It's the number 1 top performing US small metro. Number 5 fastest growing city in America would be Bend, and one of the best small business cities for businesses and careers, and a very dynamic metropolitan. I know there are lots of statistics, but I think this is really important information, and not everybody knows all of this about Central Oregon. So it's pretty fascinating to me. Bend and Redmond. Bend for 4 years was at number 1 in terms of national recognition for best performing cities. It did drop to number 13. There's a big weight on hospitality and tourism industry impact jobs. The next one you might chuckle about, housing affordability, because we all know that the cost of houses, especially the realtors in the crowd today, is definitely changing. We are now ranked number 169. Persistent national recognition in some of the areas. Number 5 last year at now we're number 12. Similar short and long-term health measures as the Millikan Institute rates for communities. And that includes a proportion of overall jobs from young businesses. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. You have the information and you can go click on those resources to learn more if you're interested in doing that. The 2021 best and worst small cities to start a business. It's pretty amazing if you look at all the small cities across the country to see where two of our communities in Central Oregon are ranked. For LaPine and Sunriver, we're a little too small to hit the ranking, but Redmond and Bend are on at number 12 and number 13, which is pretty incredible. There are 20 different data weighted points around business environment, access to resources, and the cost of doing business. And there are no other Oregon cities in the top 400. Corvallis comes in at number 421. For our business climate, it has been changing. In 2020, Oregon was ranked number 8. In 2021, we're ranked number 15. And the primary reason for the drop in the business climate index is that the corporate activity tax has definitely changed the tax structure for doing business in Oregon. Some statistics about Sunriver and LaPine. So now I'm going to move into more local information. Our market area is a little over 18,000 people with a workforce of 4,617. The average home price, and I just finished this in the last couple of weeks. For LaPine, it's $421,705, and Sunriver, $902,873. Those numbers are only for single family residences of either less than an acre or more than an acre that are stick built. And the information was provided by the Central Oregon Association of Realtors. So I appreciate their help in getting that information. The median household income for LaPine is $41,788 and Sunriver $55,750. For the student population in K through 12, the Bend LaPine School District is the fastest growing in Oregon. I'm sorry, your pictures are covering up the slides, so I'm kind of going back and forth. For the Bend LaPine district, it was over 33%, and for the Redmond district, it's 21.27%. And the next closest would be Medford at 12.5%. So you can see that our student population is growing pretty rapidly in Central Oregon, especially in the Bend, LaPine, and Redmond school districts. So our population, again, was just under 250,000 for 2020. We have over 4.5 million visitors each year that visit Central Oregon, proving that it's a great introduction to our region's culture, lifestyle, and a great first impression for new businesses considering our area. Central Oregon has been among the fastest growing regions in the US for the past 5 years with a high rate of inbound educated workforce. We're trying to get a handle on just how many people are moving into the area to conduct their businesses remotely, because we know that the number is pretty high, especially in our area. So from a population perspective, you can see how the census has changed from 2010 to 2020 with the growth of 40,520 people. And the estimate is 203,390 for the 21 census. So we're growing at more than twice the rate of the other more urban counties in Oregon, almost twice for Washington County. This population data we just pulled down from the Portland State University Population Research Center. So you have Crook, Deschutes, and Jefferson counties. If you look at all the stats, it shows that for the communities in Central Oregon, LaPine is number 2 at a 59.9% growth rate from 2010 to 21. The only community that's growing a little bit faster is Sisters at 61.1%. If you look at the top 10 communities in Oregon and their growth rate, this is 2010 to 20. LaPine comes in at number 7. The unemployment rate in 2019 for Deschutes County was 3.5%. In October of 21, it was 4.9%. So you'll notice that we're recovering from the pandemic pretty quickly. My understanding is that full employment is 4%. So at this point, almost everyone who wants to work is in the workforce. We are still hearing from some of our employers that there is a workforce shortage, and we understand that. And some of the reasons for that would include there's still some pandemic fear. There are childcare and school challenges. We're working on a project right now in LaPine that will hopefully help and alleviate some of the childcare issues. There will be a new facility that is supposed to open later this year. There has been a very large loss of older workers in the workforce. Many people retired. And there are some permanent job losses and real or perceived retraining barriers. Sometimes we hear from employers that they have jobs that are open, but they don't have the people applying for them to have the right skill set. So it's probably an opportunity to help upskill and train people for those positions. So I am going to turn it over to Geoff for the next section of the presentation.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for having us here. It's a real pleasure to speak to you today. And thank you for Patricia for doing the introductory phase of the presentation here. We've seen enormous growth in our community over the last several years. I myself have only been here for about 14 months, but in that time, we've just seen breakneck speed in terms of the permit issuance and the amount of development happening in our community. You can look at the numbers here on these slides, and you can look at the graphs for the specifics. But just to give you some idea of the activity level, and I'll speak more to this as we go through the ensuing slides. We've seen more than 100 homes come online in the last year. So it's a very busy time for building and development here. I'm sure most of you are familiar, those that are involved in the development world, that the city of LaPine has only been incorporated since 2006. So we're essentially the youngest city in the state of Oregon. I mention that because I just want to be clear with everybody that in the development process, when permits are being issued and essentially the steps that happen, we do all the zoning here in LaPine, which is not uncommon in a small community. But there's a two-part process, and all the building permits, the electrical, the plumbing, structural, that all happens with Deschutes County. Again, I'm sure most of you are aware of that. I just want people to be clear that when we go through the permitting process, it's sort of twofold between the city and the county. But the rate in which we're seeing permits is just unprecedented, especially compared to other similarly sized small communities that I've worked in the past. I've never seen anything quite like this. We can move on to the next slide. So as Patricia said in her lead-in, the SLED board and her representation with the SLED not only works with LaPine, but Sunriver as well. So we're speaking to both communities today. But as you can see, we're representing Sunriver here and the number of homes sold. That number has gone up and down over time, but it's still moving along nicely. There's a lot of activity. I speak to a lot of realtors that work in both neighborhoods, both communities, and Sunriver is seeing a lot of activity. Move on to the next slide, please. Can we move? Oh, there we go. Sorry. As it's no surprise to any of us, the sale amounts have just gone up and up and up. what we've seen here, specifically in LaPine, I mean, the rate of increase is insane. I think in the last 2 years, the average home here has gone up. We're looking at somewhere around, 75 to 80% on average. And it's no different in Sunriver. As Patricia mentioned earlier, the average price in Sunriver right now is holding around $900,000. So there's a lot of interest in our area. And in LaPine, it's slightly, it's around $420,000 today for the average home price in that category that she referenced before, below an acre or above an acre stick built. And I do want to make sure that when we're taking this information in, that we are considering that for LaPine, there's LaPine, which is the city, and then there's the LaPine larger area, and we're considering all of LaPine for these statistics. Move on to the next slide, please. So as I stated, there's an enormous increase in development here. Part of that is being driven by the amount of available residential property that we have in the city. So for those that are familiar, when you drive down Highway 97, when you go south of Burgess and before you get to Reed or First Street in the main part of LaPine, there's an enormous amount of area off to the right that's hard to see because there's currently sort of a hedgerow of trees there, but there's essentially at this juncture about 350 acres left of residential property that is yet to be developed. And that's been ongoing since about 2003. We call it the Crescent Creek neighborhood that is getting more and more built up. In the last year, like I said, we've seen about 100 new homes come online. And as this slide points out, we're anticipating about 200 upcoming. And additionally, right now, there was an RFP issued by the county for land that the county owns that's looking at expanding another 200 homes beyond that. And right now there is about 350 acres that is unbuilt. And I think that positions our community in a really, formidable spot in terms of our opportunity here, because we have the accessible residential land that is within city limits that has access to city utilities and services. So we're very fortunate in that regard. And we're just trying to keep up with the permitting right now. Next slide, please. We have some major infrastructure projects coming online. For those that are familiar with the community, you may be familiar with the water and wastewater expansion. This has been discussed since about 2016. We're actually going out to bid here in the next month. We're finally at the phase where we're going to put this project into process. It's going to be a water and wastewater expansion to two of the last parts of the community that were brought into city limits when we became officially a recognized city. And we do have all the funding in place with several agencies, USDA, DEQ, and Business Oregon. That project is probably going to go over the period of about 3 to 4 years from beginning to completion. But it's very exciting for us because it's the last part of the incorporated community that is going to be brought on to the water and wastewater system within the city. And I know that the residents of those communities they're anticipating being brought into that. So we're very excited. In addition to that, we have $1 million trail that's going to be going in between what ostensibly I like to refer to as the south end and the north end of LaPine. As you know, when you come into LaPine, there's the Wickiup area that's north of Burgess. And then there's that 2-mile stretch where there's not a whole lot, but there is all that residential land off to the right. And then there's the southern end of LaPine. There is going to be a walkway put in, albeit it will not be paved in the initial phase. It's going to be crushed gravel, but we are putting in what I like to refer to as a lifeline and a link between the two ends of the community. It's very exciting for us from a community development standpoint because we really want to bring the community together with that walking path where you don't necessarily have to get in your car to get from one end of town to the other. We have issued an RFP for what is going to be our transit center. That's going to be located on Highway 97 on 4th Street, just south of where the Ray's Market is. This is in collaboration with ODOT. And the intention of this is essentially to create a park and ride center to get people out of their cars using Cascades East to do their transportation up to Sunriver and to Bend and beyond. In addition to providing a place to essentially give the transient traffic traveling up and down 97 a place to stop, to give them inspiration to get out of their car and walk through downtown LaPine along our business district. There's also the work that Bend Broadband is doing with their gigabit passive optical network that's going to be increasing internet speeds here in the community and bring us up to the standards that are experienced in other parts of the county. Next slide, please. So Sunriver is also seeing quite a bit of development in different ways. As we're all living in this COVID world, we've seen the huge increase in the Zoom town development across the state of Oregon and across the United States. But it's been particularly interesting in the rural parts of Oregon. Prior to my arrival here in LaPine, I was out at the coast for 7 years, and I saw a lot of this developing in Tillamook County, where I was, especially given its proximity to the Portland metro area. That is to say that we're seeing the same thing here. We're seeing people, no surprise to the audience here today, being driven by their inspiration to places where they can sort of live, work, and play all in the same place. And it's been a ripe opportunity for Southern Deschutes County. Sunriver has really capitalized on that. Part of that is because of the recreational opportunities that Sunriver offers that we're all aware of. There is going to be an expansion of their trail projects there through the Central Oregon Trail Alliance, who I've talked to and spoken with about their efforts. And believe they've been given $600,000 for that project from Deschutes County to further spur their efforts. In mid-April, Sunriver Resort submitted last year. Sunriver Resort submitted a final master plan for Caldera Springs expansion. That's going to be to the east of the current development, going towards Highway 97. And I believe it's about 600 acres is what they're looking to expand. So it's just going to further increase the supply that we have here of housing opportunities in Southern County. The resort is also on schedule to open their new indoor aquatics facility by Memorial Day, further expanding those recreational opportunities in that community. In addition to, they've gotten an $8 million commitment from Deschutes County for the expansion of basically their fire and police services building, their safety department services building. They are going to be also utilizing about $700,000 in internal funds for that. And they're talking about issuing a levy for the remaining amount to get up to the $16 to $18 million in Sunriver. Next slide, please. So one thing that we're really focused on, we can build the homes, we can have the supply of residential zone. We're going to get to our industrial park in a minute, which is a big part of this whole process that we're doing here in South County in terms of our efforts. But we also want to provide the attraction for the workforce and talent. Through a lot of the efforts with SLED and EDCO, there are different initiatives to support the attraction of workforce and talent. As I'm sure all of us that have been paying attention, the amount of talent, the type of talent we're experiencing here in Central Oregon is just otherworldly. It's fantastic. Patricia recognized that college graduate perspective, that statistic earlier, which supports this. And we're really gunning to bring in more high-tech and advanced manufacturing jobs and talent. And that's part of what our efforts are here in South County. Right now, the average wages in Sunriver are just hovering above $38,000 and just above $35,000 for LaPine. And that is not reflective right now of a huge expansion yet in the high-tech and advanced manufacturing sector. We're going to get to that in just a second in hopes that we can increase those numbers. Next slide, please. So this gives you a breakdown of the current count of the types of businesses we have in the two communities. Several things stick out, particularly the construction line item. That should come as no surprise to anybody. As we all know, construction amongst the different trades, general construction, plumbing, electrical, we all struggle. We all hear the struggles from home builders and developers and getting enough people in these areas. I mean, if you're in that area right now, if you work in the trades and construction, you're at no loss for work. We do have a high number of retail trade positions here in town, which are great, but like I said, we want to expand on the manufacturing and distribution. And we do benefit here, particularly in LaPine, from the healthcare and social assistance aspect, because we do have 2 healthcare facilities. That's going to stay static. That's not going anywhere. Quite the contrary, it's probably going to grow. I know that the LaPine Health Center does have expansion plans on the docket right now. And like I said, we're looking to build that manufacturing and distribution base. So this is a good start, but we want more of those high-end, high-paying jobs. Next slide, please. So here's where we offer, and I speak to what is attractive, particularly in our area. Right now, we have, Patricia, please chime in here. What's the count of the number of available acres in our industrial park at the moment?
About 165.
Okay, that's what I thought. So of those acres that are available, and I'm going to jump back and forth on the slide here a little bit, Right now, the current cost is between $1.75 and $2 a square foot for that industrial land, which is extremely competitive, not only by regional standards, but across the state. And we're hoping that that can attract those types of jobs and businesses that I was referring to earlier. The lease rate, it says for itself, is between 50 cents and $1.10 per square foot. One thing, and this will be referred to in another slide, but one thing that's really important to note here is most of these sites are shovel ready. They already have essentially streets laid in, they're stubbed out. We're just trying to attract those businesses here. So there is an abundance, and we're very fortunate to have essentially this land sitting there. It is publicly owned by the county, and the city is in charge and responsible for the administration and sale of those sites. So if anybody has any interest, please contact my office or contact Patricia. Next slide, please. This gives you a sort of a 30,000 foot overview, literally and figuratively, of what's going on in the industrial park. If you look in the top right corner of that slide, the areas that are highlighted in that sort of lemonade yellow, if you will, are the available sites. To give you reference, Highway 97 is to the west. You can sort of see it in the top left corner of that picture in the top right. Just to give you an idea, and along the top as well, you'll see a red line along what is called Reed Road or First Street, and that's a major road for transportation out of the industrial district. So it was strategically placed to give the arterial location and movement for large trucks and distribution and delivery in and out of the industrial park. And we're very committed to our zoning and how we interpret our zoning for the industrial zone. We want to ensure that the industrial zone is maintained for manufacturing and distribution as much as our code allows. We do have, as any city does, a commercial zone, and we're really making sure that we separate the two, because we really see an opportunity here for that manufacturing and distribution base with the huge abundance at 160 acres. In addition to, I mentioned the stub outs for utilities. Also, most of the sites do have access to high-speed internet. In addition to, this is also right next to our local electrical utility. And Patricia, I know it's on here, but please back me up on this. They have 30 megawatts availability right now. Isn't that correct? In terms
They have 30 megawatts available right now, but in the short term, it's going to go to 35, and they're looking to make continued upgrades to support the demand for services.
Correct. And I know that our utility here, Midstate Electric, is constantly working, as you just referenced, in accessing more power from Bonneville, because they see that this is just going to continue to grow, and there's high demand here for the electrical service, particularly with what we anticipate in our industrial park. Next
so
slide,
I would
please.
also add that for an industrial park like this, it's pretty unheard of to have all the utilities in place. Generally, a community will build them as businesses decide they want to locate there. And so this doesn't happen very often. So we're very blessed to have this available for businesses. So the time that it takes for a turnkey operation is much more quick.
Yeah. And because that land is publicly owned, because of the cost, essentially the rates that we've set it at, I find it very competitive. And because we get to decide internally how we move forth with those purchase and sales, you'll have a partner with the city and our efforts to try to get businesses in there. So, I mean, it really is just a beautiful situation. I can't say enough about it.
And compared to other Central Oregon communities, it's significantly less costly to buy land in LaPine.
Correct. So we'll move on to the next slide.
All right, so I think I'll start talking about kind of where our leads come from. You may find this interesting. So from an economic development perspective, many of our leads come from Business Oregon. So we have our available municipally owned parcels on their website. We get some inbound inquiries. Many of you may remember I sent you information on the industrial park a few months ago with a nice narrative about LaPine and all the great things that there are available should a business decide to locate in that community. When making retention calls, we ask businesses, are you aware of any customers or suppliers that you work with that may want to consider LaPine as a location for their business? I did mention that a majority of all new jobs come from existing business, and that certainly would play out for that request of the businesses. We just had a lead from a industry association. We don't get those very often, but when they come through, it's great that we can respond to those with the goal of getting a business to come and tour the community and ultimately locate there. We get referrals from other organizations like EDCO, for example, or the local chambers of commerce. Local commercial lenders will also provide leads to us for businesses that are looking for a location. Most people who are looking at Central Oregon, they'll go look at a website before they even reach out to let us know that they're interested. So we have a lot of information, both on the City of LaPine website and also the Sunriver Area Chamber website. If you want to go check those out, there's a lot of great information on business assistance that's available. We do some website marketing. And also with some of the visitor industry organizations like COVA, we work closely with them. There are some other marketing activities that we engage in. Just yesterday, I sent out the fourth quarter progress report for the South Deschutes County, and I'm getting a lot of positive feedback from that. Our presentation today is a wonderful opportunity for us to market our area. We're working on a lead generation project with a company called Algify that recently located in Redmond. And they're doing that basically free of charge, where there's an algorithm where they look at people on social media to see who might be a good candidate to locate in our area. Business Oregon is coming over to do a tour of LaPine and Sunriver next month. And in April, we're having our annual luncheon. So if any of you are interested, we'd certainly welcome your attendance at that event so you can learn more about all the great things that are going on. There are some incentives that are available for businesses. So if you're working with a traded sector business, there is what's called an enterprise zone. So if they're eligible, they may qualify for 100% tax exemption for the new real and personal property that they would invest in. There are some cash grants available for job creation through some of the workforce development programs. So not only is there assistance in hiring through the on-the-job training program, there's also assistance available for upskilling employees if an employer is interested in that. I'm going to talk more about business capital access on the next slide. Export and international marketing assistance. The state has a program called the State Trade Export Program that's available to encourage businesses to export as many of their products as they can. There are infrastructure grants and loans available to communities to build infrastructure to support new job creation through both the state and federal government. And in 2021, the LaPine Urban Renewal Agency put a new storefront improvement program in place where a business is eligible to apply for a reimbursable grant. They invest the money and then the city through the URA will reimburse the funds that they invested in new facade improvements. Information about that is on the LaPine website, or I'd be happy to forward it to anyone who might be interested. So this is kind of a wheel of all of the things that we do to help businesses locate in our community. We just put together a guide to starting a business in LaPine. So if someone wants to get started, it kind of gives them a step-by-step process. Anything from registering your business name to getting a business license from the city. If they're going to build a building, who they need to talk to through the development process. If they need to get permits, they go to the county. So we also publish all of the available commercial and industrial sites on the progress report. I noticed that quite a few people were clicking around on those yesterday from the progress report that was distributed. So I thought that was really great news, and I'm hoping that we'll get more calls as a result of that. There is a workforce development directory available on the EDCO website. So any workforce development program that's available in Central Oregon is reviewed on that website, or I'm happy to provide that information. In regard to supply chain, We talked about the global trade encouragement from the state through the STEP program and the businesses where we encourage them to let us know of any suppliers or customers that might be a good fit. Talked about the traded sector business tax incentives. The enterprise zone program has been used by probably more than 300 different projects. I don't want to say businesses because there is no limit to the number of times a business can apply, but you have to be traded sector, which means that a majority of the goods and services that you utilize are shipped outside of Central Oregon. Doesn't have to be the state, it has to be Central Oregon in order to be eligible. For financing small business, there are so many different programs available. Many people use their commercial lending institution, which is awesome. They play a significant role in financing in Central Oregon. There are times when a business may need to partner a commercial lender with another program, and there are programs available. You may have heard of the EIDL and the PPP programs during the pandemic through the U.S. Small Business Administration, but there are other small business administration programs that are utilized pretty heavily by businesses. One is an SBA 504 loan for fixed asset financing, and also a 7A loan that basically will finance anything, real and personal property, as well as working capital. I assist Mid-State Electric Cooperative in administering. They have a USDA funded revolving loan fund. We just approved first loan in a couple of years for a new business is going to be locating in the LaPine Industrial Park. And Central Oregon Intergovernmental Council also has some loan programs. And Deschutes County has a forgivable loan program that's available for traded sector businesses that create at least 5 new jobs. The U.S. Department of Agriculture has some programs, as well as Business Oregon. So one of my jobs is to help people when they're identifying a need for financing to tailor the programs to meet their needs in the best way possible. Often before they get to the point of applying for a loan, though, they need a business plan. And if that's the case, I refer them to the Small Business Development Center at Central Oregon Community College. And then finally, the infrastructure component, if we need to build water, sewer, roads, those kinds of infrastructure to support a project, there are programs available that we can utilize through the state of Oregon, as well as the federal government. So if you look at incoming investment by county in Oregon, you'll see that Deschutes County ranks number 1. Crook County ranks number 4, and Jefferson County ranks number 7, which it's pretty amazing that we have in the top 7, 3 of the counties are in Central Oregon for the entire state. This slide provides the contact information for both Geoff and I. So if you have questions, we're happy to answer those today. But if you have questions after the presentation, feel free to reach out to either one of us, and we are happy to find the answer for you and point you in the right direction for the resource that you may need. Thank you so much for allowing me to present today. I appreciate that.
And I just want to say thank you as well. I appreciate so many of you being here. It's a really great opportunity for us to highlight what's going on in our community and the efforts we're making down here. And it's just wonderful to have you all here. So thank you.
Thank you, Patricia and Geoff. You both covered so much. There was a few questions that were asked in the chat in the Q&A that I just wanted to reiterate. Geoff did a great job answering those while you were presenting. But like I said, I just want to go over them so everybody can hear. The first was, it's up here in the chat, so give me just one moment. With respect to the current water sustainability, the city's primary aquifer is well suited to handle the capacity of the development and growth in LaPine. So that was Geoff's response, asking if the water tables were needing to be, if the water tables could be sustainable with all of the growth that he had mentioned. Are there plans to develop river access locations such as the State Rec Road Bridge and the bridge drive on the Little Deschutes? Do you have an answer for that, Geoff?
I'm sorry, I was typing an answer to another question. I
Okay.
heard State Rec Road Bridge. Can you, I don't mean to waste your time. Could you restate that for me?
Sure. Are there any plans to develop river access locations such as the State Rec Road Bridge and 3796 Bridge Drive on the Little Deschutes? It's a bit of a free-for-all at these types of locations currently.
And that's a great question. And it brings up something that isn't necessarily germane to what's happening right in LaPine or right in Sunriver, but I think it's worth expanding upon. And some people are familiar with this, others aren't. So there's LaPine and then there's LaPine. And because we're the youngest city in Deschutes County, what people consider the larger LaPine area obviously has been in existence in excess of 100 years, but the actual city limits is that distinct population of 2,600 people. And the majority of what people think of as LaPine is actually outside of the city jurisdiction and is unincorporated Deschutes County. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm not brought into those conversations or not aware of what's happening in those areas, because as sort of a default, a lot of those people come to the city looking for their, shall we say, jurisdictional answers and jurisdictional control over matters that aren't always necessarily within the city limits. Right now, I know of no efforts by the county or Oregon Parks and Recreation or any other agency, ODF&W, that might have control over that to expand upon those. I'm a little bit in the dark because it's not in the city limits, but if there was something in the works, I would have heard of it. I can tell you, as far as recreational expansion, the city we have submitted an application for an off-highway vehicle expansion area east of Highway 97 along Reed Road that would connect to the OHV area that's up in the Wickiup area that's also east of 97 to expand those offerings for the off-highway vehicle crowd and to get more people involved in that sort of recreational opportunity. But beyond that, that's the only thing we really have on the books right now. And again, I can't speak to those bridges or what the state might have or their agencies in reference to further development there. I apologize for that.
That was great. Thank you for that.
Sure.
Is there a projected completion date of the water and wastewater project in LaPine?
So we're hoping to complete it within about 2 years, but given the environment that we're in, the propensity for change orders in a project of this size, in addition to the restrictions we're all feeling when it comes to contractors and their availability, I do want to make space for the fact that this could go out 3 years, but we're shooting for 2 years. That's the intent at this point.
Okay, great. Looks like we've answered everything so far in the Q&A and in the chat. Again, they put their information on the slideshow. So if you have additional questions, you can reach out to Patricia and Geoff about these specific topics. They're happy to answer those questions through email or phone. Oh, there's one more. One more question just came up. For ADUs outside of city limits, what is the minimum amount of land to get this permit? Is it still 2 acres?
For an accessory dwelling unit outside city limits?
Yes.
That I would have to look into, because again, I don't involve myself a whole lot with the zoning requirements of the county. I'd be happy to answer that question specifically to the person that's posed it. I'd have to dig into it a little bit because it's not something I typically have to consider.
Okay. Great. I will note that for him.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, it looks like we answered all the questions, and by we, I mean Patricia and Geoff. Thank you again so much for your time. We really appreciate it. And to everyone that attended, thank you from your team here at Western Title. I'm Amy Burnham, sales team leader here in Bend, with my counterpart Hannah Williams, sales executive in Bend, and our counterpart in the Redmond, Madras, and Prineville markets, Carlene Soriano. So please reach out with any questions. We will be sending out the slide deck and the recorded presentation to all attendees, as well as your CE certificates here probably early next week when we get all of those processed. So thank you and have a wonderful rest of your week.
Thanks, Western team, and thanks everybody for participating.
Yes, thank you very much. We
a nice
appreciate the
day.
opportunity.